Good afternoon. My name is Alan McCoy. I am Director of Startup Support at the University of Maryland's UM Ventures. And I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you who joined us today for the next installment in Startup Fundamentals Workshop Series, both our live webinar audience and those watching the recording on our Startup UMD YouTube channel. This workshop series is offered by UM Ventures and Maryland Technology Enterprise Institute at the University of Maryland. To everyone attending the live session, please feel free to ask questions throughout the session. You should be able to do that using the Q&A function. You should be able to find it at the bottom of your screen. As a reminder, we are recording it and it's going to be posted on YouTube. So if you don't want to be on YouTube, please select Submit Question Anonymously. There should be a button that you can pre-check. So today we will be talking about a complicated topic. Could be complicated, but something that absolutely every University of Maryland or any university researcher needs to be aware of and needs to know about. It's really important. So I have invited the entire committee managing the conflict of interest process here at the University of Maryland, because we know how complicated it seems. But hopefully today we will demystify the complexity, and hopefully you will walk away with a much better and clearer understanding on what could potentially constitute conflict of interest and what to do about that. So without further ado, I'm gonna let the committee introduce themselves and their role within the committee and take it from here. And in the meantime, please keep submitting those questions.
So Felicia, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Felicia Metz. I'm the Associate Director at UM Ventures. I also represent our office on the university's Conflicts of Interest Committee.
So my name is Beth Britton-Powell. I'm the Director of the Disclosure Office, and Mara Trimble, the Assistant Director, has joined the call as well. And we are trying to get the COI chair on the call, but we're having Zoom issues. So while we're waiting for Phil to come in, we can probably go ahead and get started. And so basically, we're just going to do an introduction. We're going to talk about some policies. We're going to talk about the disclosure and management process. Felicia's going to go into depth about companies and entrepreneurship and how that interacts with both her office and our office. And then we'll open it up to discussion.
And to be clear too, conflicts of interest, I think, pop up often in a lot of things that we do here in the university setting. Just because you have a conflict doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong or incorrect. We just want to make sure that if there is a conflict, perceived or actual, that it's being managed appropriately, which requires disclosure. That will help keep you on the up and up and in line with other university policies, state laws, federal regulations, everything that applies to us here at the University of Maryland. So at the university, we receive a lot of federal funding, and in receiving that federal funding, the government expects us to do something with the research outputs that are being generated on campus. Our goal is to get the products of research out for public use and public benefit. To do that, often the best path is, say, creating a startup company to further develop and de-risk a technology, an invention, or some other sort of intellectual property, or directly licensing to an established company. Here's just a short list of some of our faculty-created university startup companies based on university intellectual property. Many of them you may have heard of. Inventwood came out of Bing Hu's lab, and they have products for making wood super strong, lots of different applications, one being construction. Medcura out of chemical engineering from Srini Raghavan's lab. They make products for blood clotting and wound care. IonQ is our quantum computing startup company, one of the most valuable companies now in the state of Maryland. Hazel Analytics, Blueline, Silvec Biologics, other companies up and coming, where we think we'll have some additional success. Next slide. Oh, and ion storage systems was listed there too, for battery applications. But keep in mind that entrepreneurship can lead to competing interests. And I think this is hard as a university researcher. Your focus might just be on advancing the technology, and whether you're doing that on the university side as part of a company, in your mind, it might just be about promoting, further advancing that specific technology. But it's important to recognize what hat you're wearing, and that's often hard to recognize what hat you're wearing. It might be hard to cede control of something that you might have spent 20 years working on as a university researcher. So consider what's the university's interest, what's the company's interest, what is your personal individual interest, what hat are you wearing in making any sort of decision, and think too, to all of these interests align. Sometimes they might, but not all the time. And so these competing interests need to be managed. And by managing them, you avoid things like misuse of students, misuse of resources, misuse of intellectual property, and lowers the risk of potentially biased research results. Thank you. Yep, next slide.
So Phil, this is you.
Yep. So if you want to bring this up for me, I should point out to people that, so I'm Phil DeShong. I'm the interim chair of the university's Conflict of Interest Committee. And so what Felicia was talking about is when you talk about interest is that as an employee of the university, you have a responsibility to the university and to the state. We're state employees. And so I should point out to you that whenever you start a company, you should be talking to the university and filing a disclosure on it well before you get started on the company to make sure that you don't run into the problems with these various conflicts of interest and the interest between yourself, your company, and the university. So let me just quickly go through how funding works on the campus. Most of the time, what you have is a foundation or a company or a federal agency will give funding to let's say a company in this case, it could be a company, will give the money to the university to support research on the campus. That money is then dispersed from the university to the researcher, the faculty member, to run a lab or to do whatever the appropriate research is. And this is a contract. There's a contract. Whoever's providing the funds has a contract with the university. It's transparent. Everybody knows what's supposed to be going on. All parties are aware of what is the obligations under this contract. It's legal. It's monitored, right? That is, they have people who look at both sides, both the finances and on the research. It should be, quote, unbiased. So we're expecting it to be objective research. That's what we do. That's one of the parts of the university. And then, so this is considered a primary relationship. It's very transparent. It's easily recognized what everybody's responsibilities are in this. However, when you start to run a company or you do consulting, we'll talk about both of these. These are secondary relationships, and they oftentimes are bypassing this. So if you're a consultant to a company, that the university does not sign a contract. They're unaware that what you do, the consulting policy says you have to disclose it. That's one of the reasons there is a disclosure, so the university at least knows what's going on. But this is usually bypasses the university, so the contract's not with the university. The contract is with you as a consultant. If you own a company, it's even more involved because you're the equity owner in the company. maybe a family member's equity owner. You may have student employees. Someone may have given a company may have given you a gift, which doesn't go through the normal contracting or sorts of regulations. So this is a secondary relationship, and it bypasses all of this transparency, legality business. It's not going to be, we don't necessarily monitor it unless you disclose it. So this whole thing is about disclosing here. So what our office does, the COI office, conflict of interest office, is it advises you on how to keep yourself from being getting yourself in trouble because of this secondary relationship. Those relationships are not always transparent, especially if you start a company and don't tell the university about it, or if you do consulting and don't tell the company, both of which you're supposed to do by university policy, but not, I can't say that everybody's following this carefully all the time. It's not monitored unless you disclose it because no one knows about it. You have a secondary incentive at this point, and this secondary incentive, because the company you're expecting to make money out of it in some capacity, is a potential bias. And so we have to put a management plan in place to make sure that everything is going to fulfill both federal and state regulations and laws, and also that the reputation of the university doesn't get damaged in some way. Also, we're protecting you from getting yourself in trouble, and some of these conflict of interest rules are relatively complicated. And so our office, who handles this every day, can advise you on those and keep you out of trouble. So we require disclosures. You have to disclose these secondary relationships. That's the reason there's an interp form. We're going to remove the conflict or mitigate the conflict as best we can. And our job is to manage it. Our job is not to be the policeman. You'll hear this several times during this. We're not here to tell you no and you can't do this and all of this is bad and you're a bad person, blah, blah, blah. That is not what our job is. Our job is to keep you informed so that you don't get yourself in trouble or do something that's going to ultimately lead to a problem. All right? So I think at this point, I'll turn this over.
This is still you.
Let me talk to a little bit. What is a conflict of interest? A conflict of interest, there's a financial conflict of interest. This is defined by both federal law and state law. It exists when an individual exploits or has the potential to exploit. So you don't have to have done anything that's particularly bad. You have the potential to have exploited their position for personal gain. So you work for the university, you're a university employee, but you own a company also, right? So who are you working for in this case? Are you working for the company or are you working for the university? And so this is a potential to have an exploitation. Research bias. Again, if you have a relationship out here in which this relationship could in some way bias your objectivity, and remember the university, you're doing research at the university is supposed to be highly objective. It's not supposed to, about these sorts of things. Anything that has the potential to bias your judgment in research activity is considered a conflict of interest. This could be money. This could be the fact that you're making a decision about this. All of us have these sorts of relationships that we have with individuals. So if you have a family member in this organization the relationship could be biased. Okay, so that's our job is to help you navigate this quagmire of problems and give you the best advice about how to proceed. And I'll turn over now. We'll talk about what the interp form is, and I'll turn it over to Beth, who runs the office and knows much more about this than I do. All right.
So most of you by now hopefully have heard about Interp. It is the Integrated External Relationship Portal. It's been open almost a year now. It is a combination. So for those of you who have been on campus for a long time, it is a combination of 3 systems. OPA, which is our outside professional activities reporting system, which went dormant a couple of years ago as we integrated it into our COI system. So now we have one portal to come in and tell us about external relationships. Again, you're not telling us about conflicts. You're not telling us about potential conflicts. You're telling us about what sort of outside professional activities you have with the university.
Okay,
So
we
you're-
don't see that, Beth, on the
Sorry.
screen.
I'm looking at the wrong screen. That's why. There we go.
Okay,
Okay.
there you go.
There we
Sorry.
go. So now we have one single site where you can have, you tell us about your activities there. So they're disclosed, they're reviewed, and they're dispositioned or approved in a single centralized system. We hope that you all feel like we do, that this reduces the burden. So instead of having to put similar information in 3 different systems, you put the information in once into Interp. It will also improve our accuracy and our accessibility of these records. And these are requirements. Disclosure is a requirement by the state, by the university, and by the federal government when we are going for external funding. And so when you disclose to us, we do not release that to the federal agencies. It is still required that you include that in your biosketch, your current and pending, your other support documentation. But we hope that the message you get from us today is one of, please do not tell the federal government anything you don't tell us. So our job at the university is actually to manage this. Even though the federal government requires that you have disclosures on file with us, they don't manage those. They want to know that we're doing our business. We're managing them for ourselves. So that's why you tell us about this. We get a lot of people saying, but I don't have anything to disclose. Do I still need to disclose? Yes, you do. Or I don't have a conflict. And we have to remind people we can't judge our own conflicts. And again, you are simply telling us about the kinds of outside activities that you have. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does the form have and what kinds of things do you need to disclose. So the current policy went up in June. It was revised to include additional information. And of that, all faculty, exempt staff, and now graduate students who are funded by external funding or on fellowships also need to disclose. And for us, it is now disclosure. We do these within 30 days of any major change. So if you disclose today and in 6 weeks, you get a new activity, you're supposed to go into your disclosure and update that for us. You also, if you disclose today and you have nothing that changes in your external activities for the next year, then in 10 months, the system's going to ping you to say it's time to do your annual disclosure. So these are annual, these are required by, again, by us, by the federal government, and by the state. So what needs to be disclosed again? So we're looking at all outside activities that pertain to your areas of expertise or your university responsibilities. So we get a lot of people that say, well, I work weekends at Starbucks. That's not what we're asking you to disclose. We're not asking about homeowner, community relations kind of opportunities that you have. We are looking for things that are related to what you do at the university. Again, even if you have nothing to disclose, an annual disclosure is required. The way the form works, it asks you 2 questions. And if you say no to both, then you're auto-approved. But in general, the other thing we want to remind people is with the new policy that came out in June, we are a disclose to propose university. All external funding, you have to have a disclosure on file, not disposition, but on file at the university before Aura will push the button to send your proposal out the door. So at proposal stage, again, it's not the review and disposition, but you have to have an active disclosure on file. When you are lucky enough to get an award, you have to have a disposition. We have to have a disclosure, have it reviewed, and it has to have a disposition as either no conflict or that you have a management in place before the award money can be released. So we do a lot of this behind the scenes. It does take some time to do reviews. The way that our reviews work is that you tell us your outside activities. We do a triage on it. It goes to your chair. If you have conflicts of interest in your disclosure or potential conflicts of interest, and we'll talk about what those entail, then it has to go to your dean It comes back to us to make a decision as to whether we think there are conflicts or not. If there are conflicts, it goes to the chair or may go to the committee, depending on the conflict. And at the University of Maryland, only the president can sign a management plan. So it goes all the way up the chain. So just to give you an idea of what the form looks like, again, I said we have 2 questions. So the first question that we ask is, do you have any of these kinds of activities? Service to government, employment outside of the university. So example, are you teaching courses outside of the university at other institutions? Or do you have appointments outside of the University of Maryland that are considered affiliate, adjunct, or honorary titles? Do you do grant reviews? Are you an editor of a journal? Not a peer reviewer, but an editor of a journal. Do you have international collaborations or presentations that you've done in the last year? And the last one is scholarly collaboration. And these are with foreign entities where there's no agreement between that entity and the University of Maryland. So you don't have a data agreement, you don't have an unfunded agreement, and you do not have any sponsored agreement with that. We ask you to tell us about that. We get a lot of questions as to why we ask these questions in this section. We're asking about international collaborations because the federal agencies are really looking at international collaborations and they are scraping the web. They are finding your CVs. They are finding conference proceedings. They're looking at your papers. And again, this comes back to the idea of do not tell anyone else something you don't tell us. Let us review it. Let us say whether it's a conflict or not. Because they're scraping the web, we added this question to help protect you and protect the university. We are not saying that international collaborations are bad. We love international collaborations. What we're saying is please tell us what you're doing. And for these kinds of activities, anything having to do with an international collaboration, it is reviewed by a research security office. Again, the reason for that is to protect you, to ensure that a collaboration that you've entered into with you believe your eyes open may not have something hidden in it, basically. So we've had one example of least where someone has entered in, they've done a tour through another country, and it turned out when the contract was looked at, it was a malign foreign talent program. So what we do in those cases is then we work with you as the researcher to ensure that you're protected, to ensure that we help you stop that activity. But again, this is one of the reasons we do things like we're doing today. We don't want you to be afraid to come to our office. We want you to be open and honest about what you want to do, because our job is to help you. Our job is not to say no. Our job is to help you get to a yes. It just might not be the way you think it should be done. So you might think it's going to be from A to B, and we're going to say, well, you have to go A, B to C. But again, our job is not to say no. In all the disclosures that we've gotten, we've said no 13 times, and only one of those we've not been able to resolve. So the idea is that if we can't make it happen the way you want to have it happen, we have discussions and we walk you through that. But we also are there if you're not sure. Say you're starting, someone's approached you about doing consulting or doing a collaboration. Come talk to us. We will walk through what are the benefits, what do we see as potential issues, who you should talk to. So again, we don't want you to be afraid to come and talk to us. So this is the first part of it. This is what we would typically look at if you were at the university many years ago and you did OPA, the Outside Professional Activities Report. This is what we call professional services. These are things that are expectations of faculty in general, but they can call conflicts of commitment. So the conflicts of commitment are with regard to time, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in another slide. The next thing that we have in the form are questions related to conflicts of interest. So these are do you have patents? So Felicia's office, as soon as someone says that they have IP to disclose, it's reviewed by UN Ventures. And then we also look to see whether there's supervisory relationships with family members. That can be spouses, that can be fiancés. We have siblings, we have brothers, sisters, we have fathers, daughters. We're not saying these are bad, but a lot of times if there's joint funding, they need to be managed. So please tell us about those. We also look at procurements. So are you doing business with the University of Maryland with your company hat on, or is your company doing business with the university? In many cases, we will get these referred to us, but we'd like to hear about them first. So tell us what you're doing. And again, we work with procurement to ensure that there's no conflict. The other types of things that are potential conflicts and are more research related are gifts. So you get a research gift. That has a potential conflict that comes along with it if you have a dual relationship. And most of the things that we're going to talk about in this section are about dual relationships. So our job is to sever the ties and make sure that what you're doing at the university and what you're doing outside of the university are not crossing. So if you're consulting, we have a consulting policy that came on board 3 years ago. It is a requirement that you disclose your consulting, and it is approved before you start a consulting gig, and you are limited to 8 hours a week. Entrepreneurship and startups, again, that is something that we encourage at the University of Maryland, but there are limitations and boundaries around creating companies that we'll go into later. Equity interests, facilities use agreements. When your company needs a space, you have the option to go through the facility use application process and rent space on campus. Leaves and sabbaticals, activities such as MIPS, MIIs, SBIRs, STTRs. These are when you're doing business with a company. We want to know about them, again, because we may need to put some guardrails up around the activity. And then service on boards. The thing that trips people up the most are honorariums and sponsored travel. All international travel has to be disclosed and reviewed. Any travel that is not from a domestic institution, domestic government, or from the University of Maryland also needs to be disclosed. When you are in this section, if you have none of these, you choose, I do not have any of these activities, and that's a no to that question. Again, if you say no to both of these questions, you're auto-approved. Otherwise, it goes through the whole process. So I'm trying to think,
Yeah.
Phil, that is you.
Yeah, so let's look at what we mean by all of these. So the activities that are reviewed for potential conflicts, there are two major classes of this. This is conflicts of commitment. So as a university employee, you have a contract that says you're responsible for doing X, whatever X is. So as a faculty member, I have my contract says I'm just making up these numbers because I don't remember what it is anymore. 50% of my time will be doing research, 40% of my time will be involved in teaching, and 10% of my time will be involved in administration. So if I go and start to consult, I have a consulting gig or I have a company. In fact, I do have a company, but we won't go there. Let's just say I'm consulting. So if I start to go off and consult, the reason I have to report is that I've already committed 100% of my time, according to my contract, to doing this. So I have a conflict of commitment. Now, when I go to give, let's say I'm asked to serve, I am a chemist, so I was serving on the executive committee of the American Chemical Society, and I reported that to my chair as a potential conflict of commitment because several times a year I'd have to be gone for 3 or 4 days, and as part of that, my chair, my unit head gets to designate that as professional service or as consulting. Now, in this case, it was considered professional service because this is one of the things that we do. We go off and review for federal agencies on grant proposals. We work with our professional agencies like the American Chemical Society, the American Physical Society. Choose whatever group you want to do. But we still have to ask permission to do this. It's a conflict of commitment for me to simply disappear for 3 or 4 days without leaving anything behind. So this is one of the things we do. Your basic job responsibilities are still to what's in your contract. So that's a conflict of commitment. When you put down an activity that goes to your chair and then ultimately your dean to be seen, and they get to determine whether they think that's an appropriate activity for you to be involved in. If you're going to be gone for the whole semester because you're serving on some federal committee, the Columbus spaceship blew up and you're going to serve on the committee that looks at that, they have to agree that that's an activity they're willing to let you do. Now, conflicts of interest are typically not always financial, but they offer a personal benefit to a company. So making a company, consulting, in my case, a company, one of the pharmaceutical companies comes to me and says, oh, we want you to come and you know, you're an expert in this field, and we're interested in what you and other people are doing. Why don't you come, and we have a problem in this general area, and we would like to talk to you about things that are going on in our company. And I get paid or unpaid, however we do this. It doesn't matter if you're paid or unpaid. This is actually now you're going off and talking this, and typically you get paid for this. If you're the, you know, like I said, a founder of a company, this is clearly, again, is based on research that I do here, my expertise. This would be a potential financial gain. So I have to report this to the university and get permission to do these kinds of things, so that what happens is they can generate a management plan that mitigates this potential for this, what I called secondary relationship that we saw before, which is uncontrolled usually by the university. The university doesn't come in and tell my company what to do, and they don't have a plan there that works that says, hey, this is what these guys are going to do. And so this is one of the things that we have to generate a management plan for. And they'll set up, as Beth referred to, some barriers or guidelines to mitigate the potential for bias in this situation. Who am I working for? Like I can't be on both sides. I can't represent the university on one side and the company on one side in an ongoing negotiation, right? I can't go, if I have to go to UM Ventures to negotiate, I can't say, oh, well, I'm a faculty member today, so you'll have to let me negotiate for my company. That's clearly against state law. So these are the kinds of things that we will help you figure out how to negotiate, or how to get around, let's say not get around, to
Navigate.
stay within the guidelines and move forward, so that everything can happen. You can still be entrepreneurial, but we want to see some protection for everybody, you and the university and your company, right? When we do this. Okay.
And a lot of what we're talking about are really research exemptions to state ethics laws. So we're all state employees at the university. State ethics law has strict rules and prescriptive language on what you can't do for personal gain and benefit, but they recognize the importance of entrepreneurship, starting companies to further develop university research, recognize there's a benefit to being part of that company and that company's research as well. And so as long as you're following university conflict of interest policies and your conflicts are mitigated and managed, then you are in line with state ethics laws. But failure to do that means that you're running afoul of state ethics laws and could face some bigger problems. So moving back again to talking about interactions with companies, yes, you can start a company to further develop university research. We often think that that's the best path forward to further developing a company, for further developing the technology. But we'd also like you to keep your day jobs too and continue the great work and research that you're doing at the university. So what your company can do once a company is formed is the company can license university intellectual property, hire university students, rent space on campus, can have a prime sub relationship between the university and the company. And from the university side, you can disclose that relationship. If you're planning a startup but haven't formed it yet, you can serve as the PI on, say, a TEDCO MII tech assessment project before the company is formed, even if you have a mind towards creating the company. That's money that comes to the university. It's good for you and the university. You can create IP, which then the university may license to the outside company. On the company side, you can hire professional management, which is what we want you to do. The company can apply for SBIR, STTR awards, or other funding. The company can seek investment. The company can ask for that physical lab space separate from your university lab. And the company can apply for TEDCO's company formation funding, and that's money that goes to the company, not the university. So with these things that you can do. There certainly are constraints, though, that we put in place to manage the relationship and mitigate the COIs. So again, best advice, disclose if you're thinking about incorporating or at the time of incorporating. So challenges, interactions for things that you can't do, but what I hope to show you is that almost everything, like Beth says, has a workaround. And it's very rare that the university says, no, you can't do this. We try to work with you on a solution to get to the goals that you're planning. So you can't be a PI on both sides of a proposal. This is self-dealing if you're PI on the university side and PI on the company side funding your university lab. So the solution is pick a side for individual projects. Next one. You can't have your advisees or lab personnel work in your company. The solution, though, is to have separate reporting lines for whatever that time period is that someone in your lab might be working for your company. Switch their advisor or hire another a person from another lab.
So let me just interject there real
Sure.
quickly, Felicia. The conflict of commitment committee, conflict of interest committee, when it meets, the first question they always ask is about, are the students protected? So students who work in your lab may not work at your company. Okay, that's a no-no. Students who are taking a course from you cannot work in your company. Students who you sit on their thesis defense cannot work in your company for the simple reason that you have the potential. I'm not saying you're a bad person, but you have the potential to hold that over them and get them to do things. So that is not allowed. So if a student's working in your lab, they are not allowed to work in your company. And if you, on the other hand, if there's a student, at the university who's not related to you in any way academically, wants to work for your company, God bless you, have fun, okay? But not students that, like you said here, students only when they're no longer your students. They're not beholden to you in any capacity.
One item too that's not bulleted here, which some people consider a challenge, is so our current policies say that if the university licenses intellectual property on which you're an inventor to a company in which you also have a financial interest, you need to pick which side of the transaction you want to be on. So our IP policy has a distribution scheme for sharing revenue that the university receives from licensing its IP to companies. And so if we get royalties, license payments, equity under a license agreement, under our current policy, inventors, creators get half of that revenue. But if we're getting that revenue from a company that you're also part of, in order to mitigate that financial conflict, we mitigate by having you pick which side. Do you want to receive your inventor share of revenue, or do you want to receive revenue on the company side? Usually it's being on the company side is more lucrative. So that's a conversation to have with us, which one you want to do, or if there's special considerations that we could mitigate in a different way, then we can come up with a solution there. And that's, I think, currently in the COI policy, or maybe moving into the IP policy, but that's a requirement of managing COI at this university. Next bullet point. Another thing you can't do is commingle lab and company activities. And so the solution is to keep space, people, and project tasks separate. This protects the university's IP, protects our resources, our real property, and students as well. Also, from that company side, you can't give the university gifts, internships, et cetera, in ways that benefit your own research. So instead, fund that research through the proper channels, or talk to this to the disclosure office about the best way that gift should be processed. Also, our policies prohibit negotiating with the university on behalf of the company when you're also a university employee. And the solution is to have outside counsel or another corporate officer handle that negotiation. This is there to protect your interests, protects the interests of your co-inventors, and keeps relationships better between us as university staff, you as faculty, with your faculty hat on, separate from interests of the company. When you are part of a company, you have certain fiduciary duties to that company. There's certain kind of legal duties, and university employees are permitted to be officers and directors in outside entities, but those officers and directors owe fiduciary duty to their company, which might not always align with duties they have to the university as part of your employment here. So one of these duties is a duty of loyalty, where you have to set aside your personal interests and the university's interests and make decisions on the basis of the company's best interests. And you can't do anything that would compete with the company. But I'm sure you can imagine a situation where maybe the company is applying for funding and the university is applying for funding, and that may be in competition. So that's something to consider. And usually a company's interest is to make money. So if you're making a decision that might hinder the company's ability to make money, that could be a problem. Another fiduciary duty is the duty of care. So you have to be a fully informed, active participant in the company and make good faith decisions. And this means really exercising good business judgment in the operation of the business. And this sometimes might be in conflict with what the university's interests are. And often it's hard to think about how you can manage competing duties, especially conflicts in research, when there's a potential also for biased research results. So it's usually our preference that you find someone else to have these decision-making fiduciary roles for the company. For fiduciary duties to the university as university personnel employees, this is a different standard than if you're, say, a corporate officer or director of a company. But still, you have a duty of loyalty to the university, which means there shouldn't be any direct competition with your employer during your employment. And you need to comply with university policies. And so where the duties to a company and duties to the university cannot align, that's an unmanageable conflict. And so again, a solution is step down from the fiduciary role in the company or leave the university. Let's see, an example where these competing interest duties are manageable, say the startup company that you're part of receives an STTR award. You hire a chief technology officer for the company who serves as the company PI for the STTR. Your university collaborator, who the company issues a subcontract to, is at Johns Hopkins, totally different institution. Where this sort of relationship is not managed would be, say, same STTR award, but you're the PI for the company and you sub it to your own lab here. That's generally an unmanageable conflict.
This is just a reminder of the different things that we've already talked about, but the other thing we wanted to show you here is everything that we're talking about is things that the University of Maryland has considered, the COI committee has reviewed, and these are our business processes. There's precedent for these. Phil's has been the chair of the COI committee off and on for the past 16 years. 16 years, Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I would say is that I think if you look at this, you can see how complicated these things can get. There's lots of things to do. So but while you're thinking about starting a company, why don't you come see us first and say, here's what we plan to do, and here's how we think we're going to do it. All right. And we may be able to say, well, you know, this plan's a great plan, except you have this problem. You're going to have to work this out. You know, for instance, again, you can't take equipment from the university and move it into your company. All right. Just because it would look as, you know, it would be beneficial to help you get started. That's not something you can do. You can rent space over in certain buildings. I can assure you we're not, you know, the university is not going to let you rent space in your lab to continue your company. That's a big no-no. That's never going to happen. So this sort of renting space, getting things done, serving as PIs, what do you have to do, negotiating with the university, all of these things get complicated and there are nuances to them. So if you come and talk to us, we're happy to sit down with you and say, this is what you're going to need to do it. But if you come to see us first, because what you don't want to do is set up a company thinking you're all in order and then find out, well, I can't do this, I can't do that. Here's a third thing I can't do, at least the way I originally thought. And then you've made your life complicated. Okay. So I would encourage you to come and make an appointment with the staff in the COI office. We're happy to sit down and talk to you and give you some advice on how to get started. Ala's also happy to work with you to make sure that, you know, when you set everything up, that you get it to the point where you can hit the ground running and go off and start to do those things which are going to make your company very viable from the outset, and you don't have to worry about all of these other things because you've taken care of all the responsibilities on that you have with the campus.
The other thing to keep in mind is that if you look at other universities, risk level is different across universities. So things that other universities may allow, we may not, and vice versa. For example, there are universities out there that do not allow you to be a fiduciary in your company from the very beginning. We do allow that. But at a certain stage, we ask that we help you transition out of a fiduciary. We don't allow students to work in advisors companies. We understand, yes, that they have the skills and it would be great for their career, but it creates a power differential and a dual relationship between the advisor and the student. There are other COI offices that do allow that. One of the things that we do that others do not is allow prime sub relationships with faculty startups. We do allow that. You simply have to pick a side. As Felicia mentioned, you know, when you have a prime sub relationship, you have to tell us if the money's coming to your lab, then you're on the University of Maryland side. You have to have somebody else at the company that's doing the company work. So just keep those things in mind, that not all disclosure offices have the same risk tolerance or risk averseness. So ours are based on years of precedent, but also evolution. So we've seen how things change. We've seen as we've gotten more startup companies in the university, we've seen where things have gone really great. We've seen where things have not gone really great. And our guidelines and precedents are set on those examples, but we do change over time. And so something that potentially you were allowed to do 5 years ago you may not be allowed to do today. And some of that is our changing, some of that is the federal landscape changing. So again, coming to us and asking advice, we consult with Ala, we work with Felicia very closely. Felicia actually sits on the COI committee. And so we all work together. So you're not in a vacuum, and hopefully we're all telling you very similar things.
And if all of this seems hard and complicated, having a company is hard and complicated. So I think consider that in your entrepreneurial, plans. I see there's a question. Do you want to take that now or wait till the end?
Go for it. Let's see. I don't know if I can get to the questions.
So
think
it's
Robert,
somebody
Robert raised his hand.
Yeah, Robert, you should be able to talk if you unmute.
Turn on your video, Robert.
Oh no, video is not going to be turned on, but he's allowed to
Okay.
talk.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Maybe that was a mistake.
Robert, did you have a question?
Okay, no problem.
Okay. The next couple slides we're going to go through are just about the roles and responsibilities for disclosures. And so faculty members, researchers, exempt staff, an honest and complete disclosure. If you're unsure, disclose, or if you're unsure, call us and ask us. We walk through the disclosure process with people every day. Takes about a half an hour with the hope that at the end of that half an hour, you hit the submit button. Never feel like you don't have someone to talk to, but we also have written guides and we have videos to help you through that process. The chairs and deans, their job is to do a thoughtful triage. What is their situational awareness? So they're reviewing the disclosures to say, yes, as far as I know, everything that I know about this person has been disclosed in their outside activities. And I clicked the link instead. And I clicked the link instead again. There we go. So they're looking to see, can the COI, if there is one, be eliminated? If not, is the activity necessary and important to do? Is it reasonable? And is a management possible? So they give us feedback on that. Again, the committee has given the office the ability to make a lot of the decisions, but the ones that are unique or more complex, we take to the committee, and their job is advanced triage. So to look and determine whether there is a conflict, can it be managed, how it should be managed, how it should be reviewed, and how to ensure compliance. And as I stated, on our campus, the only person who can sign a management plan into existence is the president. So the president gets final approval, but there's a chain of, we develop the plan, you review it, ensure that you understand it, you have an oversight official who takes care of certain things for you. So for example, if you have a prime sub relationship, you would not be allowed to review invoices coming from your own company. You would say, yes, that work has been completed, it's been completed to satisfaction, but there would be somebody else who would take that financial oversight of it. Again, this is in no way implying that we think anyone is doing anything wrong, but we want to ensure that anyone looking at what the University of Maryland is doing as far as businesses says, yes, the university is taking care of business. So we're looking at people looking on from the outside in, ensuring that we're doing the right thing by you and by the university and by them. So resolving conflicts. So in general, they can be real or perceived. And it is basic that we, again, are protecting the university, but it's about integrity. It's about truthfulness. It's about how we do our research. So we create management plans that minimize the conflicts so we can eliminate the incentive. So you may have to give up equity, or as Felicia mentioned, you might have to step down as a fiduciary in a role. You cannot have dual relationships. So if you are consulting for somebody and then they want to give you a gift, then we're going to ask you, what would you prefer to keep, the consultancy or the gift? Because one could influence the other. So we ensure that we break those ties of dual relationships. We can restrict equity. We can manage the consequences by having independent monitoring. And this is by far the most prevalent part of our management plans is oversight. But there are some conflicts of interest that cannot be avoided and they cannot be managed. We've had in the past 4 years, almost 8,000 disclosures. We've said no 13 times and said that they're unmanageable as disclosed. So of those unmanageable as disclosed, the next step is to then sit with the discloser, review with them the activities and try to figure out if there's a different way forward. In 12 out of those 13 cases, we found a different way forward that brought them into compliance. And in the last case, the person left the university. So our job really is to help. And features of the management plan. So mitigating factors are again, the use of students and employees in the project. So if they are working in your lab, if you pay them, if you advise them, if you have a supervisory relationship, they should not be working in the company. They can only work on the lab side. So that's one question I got this week is like, well, they can't work in my company, but can they work on the Maryland subaward? And yes, if it's in your lab, they can work on the Maryland subaward because they're doing it as a University of Maryland employee, not as a company employee. We have oversight. We also have things like public disclosure of conflicts. So if you have a conflict a COI management plan, then in presentations and publications, it's the expectation that you are telling people that there is a conflict that's being managed and this is what it is. So again, we have these on our websites, just sample management plans. So if you have an oversight official, and again, this is pretty typical in all of our management plans, and it's usually your department chair. So we will meet with you to explain the plan, go over the plan, see what questions there are. We have annual meetings with students. We want to ensure that we are doing training on an annual basis of what a conflict is, why there's a conflict of interest plan, and for students, who can they come talk to if they have a concern in the lab or in the research group. And we want to ensure them that they know they can come to us, the COI chair, or to the ombuds person. Again, if you are in a prime sub relationship with your company and the University of Maryland is subbing to your company, you can't initiate the sub documents. You can't be the sole reviewer of the invoices. Again, this is all to ensure that you are protected as well as the university. And then we submit reports to the COI committee.
So Hammy, there's a question in the chat. Can faculty accept sponsored research from a company where they have equity? I think that Beth, you sort of touched on.
So that is acceptable, but there would probably be a management plan put in place. So our management plans are from a low risk to a high. We have 3 levels. So low risk are familial plans, licensed IP. An equity might be the same thing. It would depend on the amount of equity in the company and what the project is. When there are prime sub relationships, that raises it up risk level. So it's a little riskier. So we put a little bit more oversight in place. And then when we have faculty members who are prolific when it comes to creating companies or have very complex portfolios, and our management plans are portfolio based, it's not by project. So we had somebody who worked at the university who had 9 companies. They had the highest level risk because, again, that's a lot of risk for the university to take on. And so, but yes, it is something that we can discuss and should be disclosed and reviewed before you move forward.
I think we are at time too. This was what, second to last slide.
These are just examples of publication disclosures that can be made, and these can be found on our website. We can just skip that one.
Well, thank you so much. It is a complicated topic. It is and it isn't. A lot of it is common sense. It's just when you think about it, but a lot of it can be confusing. So please do reach out to the Conflict of Interest Committee. I placed in the chat a link to their website. Also, Phil, you mentioned getting space on campus. Just yesterday, we had a workshop on how to do that, and I placed a link to the video. So this video will also be placed on Startup PMD YouTube channel. You can review it there. You can review it multiple times. With any questions, please reach out to Beth, Felicia, Maura, or Phil. They're very responsive. Keep in mind that they are processing a lot of disclosures. So with this disclose to apply for funding rule at the university, they're overwhelmed, but they are doing their best, and a rockstar team. So thank you so much thank you for this workshop today. It's a lot of information to fit in 1 hour. And thank you for all that you do for our campus community.
So
Thanks for having us, Isla.
It's always nice to be able to take a big workshop and condense it down for people. It's relatively straightforward. Disclose and call us. Okay. If you disclose and call us, we'll help you get through. That's what our job is. That's the reason we're here. Okay. So disclose and call it. I'd prefer you call us first and then make sure you disclose. That'll save you some time and effort. So you can, if you're going to take notes, that's the 2 to take, right? Call us and disclose, and we'll make sure that we give you the best advice you can get for moving forward.
Yeah, and don't think of this office as your police who will be punishing you. They're not punishing anybody. They're just keeping you out of trouble. So think of them as your attorney who helps you keep out of trouble.
Thank you. Thanks for organizing, Ala.
Thanks,
Yep,
Ella.
thank you so much.
Thanks, Ala. See you
Thank
guys.
Thank you, Phil, Beth, Felicia, Maura, and this will be on YouTube.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.